Last section here, we're going to be integrating with Liferay's workflow engine. So workflow is the process that needs to be taken in order for something to be deemed complete. Most of the time, functionally speaking, we're doing this so that we're able to have a review process. So in order for something to be saved, we first need to have it reviewed by this person, and this person. Just for example, we have control over what our workflows look like. Does it need to be seen by one person, by many people, by a specific group of people? We have that kind of control. We talk about workflow because any asset in Liferay or any asset integrated into the asset framework is able to also be integrated within the workflow as well. So first part is creating what we call a workflow definition. What does our workflow look like? And Liferay has a tool to help us out with this. It's called the Kaleo Workflow Editor. So how do we get our entity into the workflow engine? The first thing we need to do is take a look over in service.xml and just make sure that the status field is there. And it should be from the previous exercises. From there, what we want to be able to do is when the workflow is initiated, we want a workflow instance to be created. And then when the workflow is finished, we want that workflow instance to be deleted. And this is going to be taken care of over in the service layer. Right, as we progress through the workflow, we want to be able to update the status as well. Right, so we're going to be handling the status within specific getter methods over in our service layer. Right, and with that, we will then create a workflow handler component and update the status method within our service layer. And if we need a special perspective, a special point of view, we can create that as well. So let's take a look at an example of integrating the blogs portlet into Liferay's workflow engine. So the first thing is over in our service.xml, we make sure we have that status field as well as a couple other ones. Step 2, right? We want to create the workflow instance whenever we create, in this case, the blog entry. Right? And we want the same thing to happen when the our blog is deleted as well. We don't want any of these floating workflow instances to kind of just hang out. So step 3 here is getting the status of the workflow. So we want to take that into account as we retrieve or as we get our blog entries. So step number 4 here is creating this workflow handler. The whole idea of the handler is to be able to keep track of what status or where along the line the workflow, or where along the line are we in the workflow. So we start off with the workflow handler that extends the base workflow handler. We then target what exactly are we trying to integrate within the workflow engine, so blogs entry. And then from there, what we're doing is we're going to be checking our status to see, is it scheduled, is it approved, or maybe some other one. So a way in which we can update the status of our entity that's going through the workflow. And then finally, the last step here is showing that status over in the UI, right? So we don't want the status to kind of be tucked away behind the scenes. We want our end users to be able to see that status as well. So let's go ahead and let's integrate our gradebook application into the workflow engine. So this is going to be our main objective here. So whenever we create a submission, or whenever our students create a submission, we want to be able to subject that to a specific workflow. So the steps that we're going to take, just as what we saw before. we're going to make sure that the required status fields are going to be there for our submission entity. We'll then add a workflow instance link so that this will keep track of when our submission is created. We'll also create this workflow instance, and then when it's deleted, we'll also delete it. Right? We'll then add the methods to take into account the status. Is it pending? Is it rejected? And so on. We'll then create that workflow handler and then further update the status through the UI. So with all of that, let's go ahead and take our gradebook application and integrate it into Liferay's workflow framework or system.